Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Home to Here. As you know, at Home to Here, we talk to adult immigrants about their journey from home to here. So from their home country to wherever they are in the world today. And I'm so excited about our guest today because I met her when I was doing my master's at Cornell. And she's a person that, we really became pandemic pals. So I'm really excited to welcome her today. Marie, hi, how are you?
Hi, Gianni. How are you?
Good. Where are we speaking to you from today?
I'm in New York City.
Wow. And as you guys know, I absolutely love New York. So Marie, tell us about yourself. Where did you move from and where did you move from?
So I came from Australia. So I came from a little beach town called Newcastle.
Wow. And now and you were home recently, weren't you?
So I just went home in December to renew my visa and then stayed for a little bit of summer and Christmas.
See, that's the thing, summer and Christmas. I miss that so much. A summer, Christmas, that's definitely a goal for this year. So Marie, tell me, what was it like growing up in Australia?
Growing up in Australia is really nice. So my parents usually took us on holidays or vacations within Australia. So we would always go camping and explore most of Australia or New Zealand because that's where my parents are actually from. I would say they always reinforced being outdoors and winding down. So we always went camping twice a year with family friends. And even as a child, it sounds silly to wind down, I think, but it was really nice spending time without any computers, any technology, just writing, playing. We would make up dances. And it was just nice having no sense of time and just enjoying the outdoors. And then, I don't know what else.
And in terms of, so what you grew up and lived in Newcastle the entire time, or did you move around other parts of Australia?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes. So I grew up in Newcastle for my entire childhood. We never moved. So my dad actually built the house that I grew up in. So my siblings had to live in a caravan while my dad built that himself. We stayed in the same town. We went to school maybe an hour away where there was a bigger school that we could all attend. And we'd just get the school bus. And then when I was in year 12, so when I was after my final year of school, I went to France for a year to do an exchange. So I lived in France for a year. And then when I came back was when I started my university education. And I also stayed in the same town. So my parents offered to pay for my university education if I stayed, which looking back now was a really good deal. So I went to university and stayed home. And I honestly think that was the best thing for me. So the University of Newcastle is quite a small university compared to what you would consider the Ivy Leagues of Australia. And I think that going there is a reason as to where I am today. So I was in a class of 100 studying biomedical science, and it was there that we really got to know all your professors because the classes were quite small, and each class usually had a laboratory component and they would lead the laboratory work. So you really got to know your professors one-on-one, and we formed a really nice cohort. So I'm still in touch with all my friends that I made in university, and we all attend weddings and big events. And I think my professors there really inspired me to do research because you could see how passionate they were. And with a small environment, you were really able to connect with them. And I think if I was somewhere bigger where I was just lost within all the people, I just don't know if I would have engaged in science as much as I did. And so that's kind of what inspired me to keep studying science and eventually go on to my PhD.
And if we can maybe just step back a little bit. So you said you spent a year in France on an exchange program. So that sounds like your first time really leaving home, really leaving, a small town environment. And what do you think that did for you? Leading up to where you are now, what do you think that year away did for you?
So I would say that was the first time that I really had to grow up. Um, so I was 18 when I left for France, and I essentially went and did school, another year of school, but this time it was all in French. And I went to a very small town near Toulouse in the south of France. Uh, and so there was no one to speak English to me. I had to really step up, apply, and learn the language. But that would have been my first real experience away from home without my parents, without being able to communicate or do things for myself. But I think it really made me mature because I had to do things for myself. I had to really increase my confidence because there was no one who was going to speak for me or who could understand what I needed. And then I also just think it helped me mature a little. So I think if I come straight out of school, I don't know if I would have been ready to study straight away again. I think I'd put so much pressure on myself in those final years to get the scores to get into the university courses I wanted to do. So I think it just gave me time to relax, to mature a little bit, and then be ready for the next phase.
Yeah, that's great that you can see that, traveling away from home did give you that boost in confidence for you to then pursue the next thing you wanted to do. And then when you were at your university, you said that being there, well, maybe I don't think we even told people what you do. So maybe let's start that.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I work as a postdoctoral researcher at a university. So essentially, I do research in a lab. Yeah.
What's your topic of research?
Sorry. So I do cancer research. So more specifically, I do cancer research in the USA.
Okay. Thanks for that background. So when you were studying in Newcastle, working towards your PhD, how do you think that, that shaped ultimately your then decision to move to the US? And how did you then come across the opportunity to, come and do your postdoc in the US from your time in Newcastle?
So when I was in Newcastle, so the way the degrees are structured, so I did my bachelor's degree and then I did an honours degree, which is a research intensive year. So you perform a research project, you spend most of your time in the lab. And it was there that I had a mentor that really inspired me and was really passionate about science. And I loved learning from her. And during that year, about 3/4 of the way through, she actually left. She left to go become a patent attorney, which at the time was really devastating because I really enjoyed working under her and she was very inspiring. And once she left, it made me reconsider, should I always be in the same place? So after that year was when I started looking at PhDs. And it was only when she left that I started looking outside of Newcastle for potential opportunities. Before that, I honestly think I would have stayed in Newcastle the whole time. So it was after that degree that I moved to Melbourne. And it was when I was studying in Melbourne that I met the professor that I work for now. So he is Australian as well. And he was at a conference in Australia. So we met at a conference, and I just thought he was super interesting. And when I looked up his work, he also works on colorectal cancer research, which is what I was doing. And yeah, he was just one of those people that you meet and you form an instant connection with. And he was also very inspiring, very smart. And I just liked the progressive research that he was doing. So that's how we first met. And then, when I went on a conference and then I interviewed properly. Yeah.
That's really I like that, that you spoke about the impact that your first mentor had. And when you saw her branching out, I guess, not only to leave science, but to leave and go into law. So then that, was your own motivation to consider not like, hey, maybe you should leave this, a specific place. What were some of those conversations like, leading up to the time that you left? What was that like with your parents? Because I think I understand that, like, everyone in your family, kind of is in the same place and you're the only person who's, now made this or at that time was considering making this very big move. What was that, conversation like with your family?
I think they've always been pretty supportive. So in addition to doing the year abroad in France, I also did a semester abroad in Sweden when I was doing my college degree. So I think by that point they were pretty used to me leaving because I'd left to go to France, I'd left to go to Sweden, I had left to go to Melbourne. So I wasn't living at home necessarily when I left. So I think they were pretty used to me going away. And yeah, I think they've always, I think my parents have always been very supportive of you following your dreams. So my parents, like most immigrant parents, I guess this is generalizing, have worked really hard so that we can have the life that we want. So they've been very supportive in us following our passions and our dreams, whether that's academic or not. They've always really encouraged us to do that, and they worked hard so that we can do that. So yeah, and I would say they're very proud. Whenever I go home, my dad is always introducing me to any new person or even people I know as, this is my daughter, she's from New York. So I would say they're proud.
Girl, I know that thing of like going around with your dad and he's introducing you to every single person, telling them. I think if you knew my address, he'd also tell them like the exact location I live in. So
yeah.
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
So what were some of the things that you considered when you got the opportunity? I guess you said you went through the interview process, and what were some of the things that you considered when you eventually did get, like the confirmation?
For me, I'm very motivated and passionate about the work that I do. So the environment of work was a very important thing. So whether I was going to have a team that I got along with, whether they were supportive, whether my mentor, my professor was a good person who was going to help you through. I think that was probably the biggest thing, because I think no matter where you are, if you need to have good support in your job, because that's where you spend a lot of your time.
That's true.
So I think that, and then housing. Housing was probably the next thing that I was most worried about, just because when you're moving to a new country, it can be very hard to navigate when you don't know what all the criteria are, and you don't have a bank account or references and things like that. So I think housing and then the work environment, and both those were pretty well taken care of by Cornell.
Yeah, look at us, making a promo for Cornell. They should pay us.
Yeah, please.
And I know you already spoke about housing, but were there some other, things that had influenced your view around what living in the US is like? And then when you actually got here, what was the experience like?
So I think your expectations of New York is always a little bit based on the glamour that you see in TV shows and movies, but also from traveling. So one of the expectations, or one of the things that I'd always experienced, is people can be very abrupt and a little bit rude, which is, as a tourist, you're a pretty annoying person, I think, sometimes. So you can understand that. But I think I was surprised by how kind and nice people are in New York City. I think I expected everyone to just kind of push you out of the way and be a little aggressive. But I think that was the most surprising thing. It was people were incredibly helpful, and incredibly nice if you ask. And then I think the rest is more around glamorization of what you see in the shows of, always being in very big, luxurious apartments, when the reality is they're all very small, and they can be in very old buildings, which are not what you see in the movies. But yeah, I'd say it's probably better than what you expect, though. And New York, once you find your own pace and your own, your own rhythm and your own pace, I think it's way better than anything you can expect. So it's not theatre shows every night. You do have some mundane and normal parts of your life.
Yeah.
But everything is there at your fingertips if you want it.
Yeah. And I like that you spoke about pace, I guess, which kind of is a great segue to talk about how we met. pace.
Yeah.
So Marie and I met in through a running club, coincidentally. And I was, the not so fast person. And Marie was the super fast person. And we were going around, I think, doing introductions. And then we were like, oh, hi. And we were like, oh, where do you live? Where do you live? And we both live like in this tiny, tiny, like 3-mile radius little place called Roosevelt Island. And so shout out to like the 7 people listening to this podcast who have heard about Roosevelt Island. And we found out that not only do we live in Roosevelt Island, we live in the same building. So, Marie, sorry, please go on.
I was going to say, that's also another thing about New York that you wouldn't expect, is it's a much smaller place than you realize. So we were attending a church that was a mega church, and we never would have met each other, I don't think, if it wasn't for this group. But it's such a small world that we met each other and we realized we live in the same building and attend the same university.
Yes. Just like in the most random of ways, just through this group. Marie continued running. Marie has completed not 1, but 2 New York City marathons. So that, I guess, is, speaks to her pace. She's extremely, extremely fast. What was your time on this last one?
It was 3:13:57. So almost 3.
Yeah, please, hear that. Okay. But what are some other things that you've done, to find your pace in New York? You spoke about, because you've then come from a small town experience, kind of environments that you're super comfortable and familiar with, to now living in New York City, which is, familiarity and comfort are not the first things that come to mind when you think of New York City. So how have you made it your place? How have you found your pace?
So as you mentioned, I do a lot of running. So to me, one way of finding my own rhythm and my own community has been through running clubs. So I joined a running club within New York that meet 3 or 4 times a week. And then I also volunteered as a run leader to lead runs, leading up to marathon series, which sounds a little crazy when you don't really know where you are and where you're going, but GPS maps kind of help with that. But yeah, I would say it's probably the biggest part of me finding community here has been through running. So I joined a running club that did competitive running where I could improve and have people to run with regularly. I have run as a pace leader, and then there was also a community organization where I volunteered as a run leader for a program that worked with homeless shelters. So they used running as a way to get people out of homelessness, and I mean that's a whole nother thing. But I think that's where I've really found community through those different aspects.
I really used to like when you tell me the stories about the people that you actually met. I think you said the program is called Back on Your Feet.
Yeah. So it's Back on My Feet.
Yeah. So I really used to appreciate those stories. And again, just like the power of creating a community, that's like healthy and, brings people from all walks of life, and just ultimately really the power of running. And maybe it's my sign for me to get back to running this year. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe. I also think it's always been a really nice way to meet people outside of your sphere of work and then from different communities. So I think the best friends that I've made and the friendships and communities that I've created within New York have all come from running, and they're people that are in lines of work that I would never have met otherwise. And they're probably the strongest friendships that I've made, because you can always go on a run, but I think it's the continuation. It's not something that you do once and then you stop and then maybe you won't see them again. It's always something that is available, always, whether you do it within an organized group or whether you do it outside of it. It's always there for you to do.
I think that's one of when people come on the podcast, we do talk about, like acclimatizing, settling, how people are making friends. So people have spoken about, especially people that are based in the US, spoken about, some of their challenges with connecting, especially like with Americans, and how difficult that can be, or, just not finding places of commonality. So it's interesting, and it's even an idea to hear you talking about, maybe using sport as a way to connect with, like native people from DC or native New Yorkers and stuff like that.
Yeah. So I would say, so the first friends that I made in the US and the strongest friendships that I have were from the same group that we were part of. It was a very small group within a much bigger organization. But those are the friends that I first connected with and then have seen me through the pandemic and throughout my time in the US that I still connect with. And although they don't all run now, I think that foundation
included.
that foundation was a really strong one. And I would say, I think through that group is probably the only true American friends that I have. And I mean that as in people who were born in the US. All the other friends that I've made throughout various groups are usually immigrants. And I find that's just the common thing. You end up connecting with immigrants and because you have shared experiences.
Yeah.
But those very first friends are friends that were born in the US who've taught me about all the traditions and celebrate holidays with me. So, yeah.
That's great. And as you're talking about traditions, what are some traditions from Australia that you are still holding on to and that you still celebrate and that you're teaching other people, if you are, about? So what are some Australian traditions that you're still holding on to?
So one thing I've tried that has not really caught on, and I do keep trying, is Christmas in July. So in Australia, because the seasons are reversed, we normally celebrate Christmas halfway through the year, not as a serious thing, but often people will have a Christmas meal, usually with friends, in winter, so that we can wear sweaters and somewhat enjoy some of the traditions that we see in American and European movies, because we have Christmas in summer. And even it can be extremely hot. You can be sweating, and a large majority of families will insist that you eat a hot meal, like a full roast meal. So one thing I was always trying to get people to do is Christmas in July so that they can have a summer Christmas. Yeah, I'd say that's probably the biggest thing.
I feel like I haven't gotten my invitation to Christmas in July. Maybe we should do it after the 4th of July.
Yeah, we should.
And in terms of yourself, what values do you see yourself still holding on to from Australia? Like the person that you were, that lived in a small town, what elements of yourself are you still holding true to and have been pivotal to you navigating the season?
That's a hard one.
That's what they all say. They say they come on this podcast, I ask them hard questions.
Yeah. So having immigrant parents, I would say that work ethic has been something that was always drilled into me, that you have to work hard and you must work hard in order to be successful later on. So that has been something that has always been hard to let go, and that's probably not a bad thing. But yeah, I would say that work ethic of you must grind and you must do your best all the time. I think that's been something that has always been drilled into me. So I think sometimes it can be hard to wind down or relax in a sense, because you feel like you always have to be pushing and persevering through. But in saying that, the desire to take holidays and go on vacations has always been pretty strong, because I'm used to having a lot more vacation time in Australia. So that was something to adjust to, that you don't have 6 weeks of holidays that you can just take off.
Yeah. The holidays in America are very scant. That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I'd say they're very scant. Yeah.
Scant and scarce. There's no free day in America. So maybe that work ethic that you came with, it's found the right environment.
Yes.
And then, so I'm going to go on a limb here and say, growing up in Newcastle, I assume, this is an assumption, that it was, to some extent, it could have been a very like homogenous society, people of same culture, in everything like that. And now you're living in New York City, which is like the most diverse, melting pot of people, races, cultures, behaviors, everything. How have you, navigated that? And especially having lived in New York, through what we saw with the George Floyd, the George Floyd protests and everything like that. How did you find your place in all of that?
So I would say it's been a very big learning curve. Your assumptions are correct. Newcastle is a very homogenous society that has not changed a lot. It's not a lot of people move out, and new people don't necessarily move in. If people move in Australia, they move to cities. So I would say it was confronting, but also a big growth period. So I feel like I've learned a lot in New York City about different cultures that I just hadn't been exposed to before. So I think it's been a really good opportunity, but you do have to have a very open mind and ready to learn about things, because it's not that anything is scary, but you're seeing cultures, religions, people that you've never seen or not heard about, but like you've never actually lived with them, and been exposed to things that they do or things that they wear. So it's a very interesting time. But I think as long as you're open, it's a nice opportunity to learn.
It has been. It truly is a learning curve, a learning opportunity. And I think as long as you're approaching with curiosity, people also are then also encouraged to share more about themselves with you too.
Yeah.
And do you think have you also then taken the opportunity to go home, or when you're having conversations with your friends from home, to like lend your voice in terms of helping them get like better context of, certain topics that they may not be confronted with, within their environment?
Yeah, I definitely think it changes your conversations and the tone of the conversation. I mean, I'd still say I struggle with that in some contexts, only because views can be very rigid. So trying to come in with a different opinion, say with a different generation, can be a little hard. But I definitely think it just changes your own perspective and thinking and how you approach situations.
And within your, like right now, I know your film, we're doing this and this is in your boss's office, so shout out to your boss. And you said when you spoke to them about, the job, there were certain, elements that you're looking for from that. Now that you're here in the role, not putting you in a hard spot, but has the role, met the expectations that you have in terms of the work you wanted to do, the type of place you wanted to work in? How have you, as a woman in science, that's such a big deal. So how have you, seen your development in that?
I would say the job has definitely been a lot harder than I expected. I think it's been a lot more challenging, and I've had to work harder than I ever had before. But in saying that, I think I've grown a lot. I've learned a lot here, which was why I wanted to come, to learn new skills, to broaden my thinking. And I think it's definitely been the case. I think I've been challenged in many ways here, and it's been very stressful. But yeah, I would say it's been harder than I expected, but also better than I expected. in terms of
What
growth.
are the parts that are, let's hear about the good parts. What are the parts that have been better than you expected?
I would just say the opportunities. So there's been a lot of opportunities here to go to conferences, but also connect with the people you work with. So my work does a retreat every year. And I would say my own team provides these opportunities. So we always have annual picnics where you can connect and just get to know your colleagues a little more. So they've been very social and supportive. So, for example, we do a little Thanksgiving at work every year. We go on picnics. We, go out together. So I think that has been really good. And then, I would just say and just the things that I've been able to learn. So that the technology that I have access to, the people to learn from, it's been very collaborative here. So often a thing that you hear about research in the US is that it's very individual and that people will go against helping others. And I found that really not to be the case. I found everyone really supportive, encouraging, and helpful, which has been nice.
And was that similar to the environment that you came from in Australia, where it was collaborative, open?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So that's good. So maybe you're the common denominator. You bring a good work. You bring a good work vibe wherever you go. And what's next, Marie? What's next for you? Do you see yourself being able to make New York specifically your home?
Oh, I really don't know. I've obviously have to face this question sooner rather than later. But I don't know. I think I've grown to like New York more and more the longer I stay. But I also love my hometown and Australia. So I have to make some big decisions of where I will work next, whether I go back to Australia or whether I stay here. But I could almost see myself staying in the US, maybe not in New York. But I think the longer I stay, the more I think if I ever move away from New York, I'll miss it, which is not a thought that I had originally when I moved here. It was, this is new, it's exciting, but I didn't know if I'd ever miss it. Whereas now there's a lot of things that I do that I think I would really miss this.
And I think that's totally fair. When you're saying you're thinking about, obviously a job is obviously a really big consideration, but what else would be on your list of things to consider when you're making the decision between staying and leaving New York, staying in New York or leaving to particularly go back to Australia? So apart from work, what else is on that list?
I would say just the general lifestyle. So in saying that, I mean things like work-life balance. Are you in a place where people value balance and having hobbies outside? Having somewhere that I can run and feel safe is important. Just space in general, having a backyard, having your own space that you can live in rather than being confined to a small space. I would say community, culture, and lifestyle.
Okay. So talking about culture, I know you already spoke about the specific tradition, which is, Christmas in July, but what other ways do you try to stay connected to your culture, the culture that you grew up within in Australia?
I really don't know. I mean, I always listen to Australian podcasts in the morning. I like being connected to what is happening. And I think that's very important, just knowing the changes that are happening. And I still have to vote while I'm in the US.
Oh, great.
So I try to stay informed of politically and culturally. I like to still continue to support Australian artists in different ways.
And you cook, Marie. You cook. You made a shepherd's pie.
No, that's true, actually. To Thanksgiving in America last year, I made pavlovas, which is an Australian Christmas dessert, but I brought that to American Thanksgiving. So yeah, I do. Yeah, I bake. That's true.
Yeah, like Marie is an excellent, excellent cook and an amazing baker. She has baked me birthday cakes. Like she really is. I mean, like she's in the lab and she's in the kitchen. Like she is cooking it up everywhere.
That is true.
Thanks, Marie. Now we're going to head over to some of our rapid fire questions. So these are just going to be, say the first thing that comes to mind, and yeah, let's just have fun with it. Home or here?
Oh,
And why would you say home? Why home? It sounds like you are enjoying here, so
probably just because I've been there. I think I miss the beach in summer. I think that's the biggest thing. I miss the beach and going swimming in summer, which is something that's harder to do in New York.
Yeah, Rockaway just ain't cutting it. I'm just joking. No. What is your favorite food back home?
Oh, I'd say a roast meal. So like roast chicken, roast lamb.
A good roast. And what's your favorite snack here in the US?
Oh, what is my favorite snack? That's a good question. I don't know if I have a. Well, I think my favorite thing is bagels. But that's not really a snack. But I
think it counts. I'll take it. I'll accept it. Bagels, yes. Like that was the one thing I did when I was in New York this weekend. Went to the bodega there in Roosevelt Island, and I was like,
yes,
give me a bacon, egg, and cheese on a plain bagel. That is epitome of a good life.
Yes.
And then the next question: if I have never heard music from Australia, what song would you recommend and why? What does that music say about Australia to you?
So I would say they're true. So Vance Joy, Riptide is one of my favorite songs that he's very well known for. But I think he just really symbolizes Australia. He's laid back, he's funny, he's confident, and his music is just the quintessential Australian, like having a good time, being relaxed.
I think that's a good memory. It feels very nice and fresh and just like grounding, connecting, exciting. Now that we've spoken about a memory from home, what is a very American thing? What is something that you have come and you've experienced here and you're like, oh my gosh, only in America do they do this?
The Thanksgiving Day parade. I think that is so crazy and it's so huge. And people just get excited for the most random things. So I went last year and people were chanting for a giant blow up acorn. I don't know that Asians would get excited about that. Yeah, I would say Thanksgiving and having 2 days off just to eat and spend with your family, I think is the most American thing I can think of.
Yeah, because you get the Thursday and the Friday. And what you are doing, I mean, a turkey is a really big bird. You need all that time to finish it.
Well, you need all day to cook it and then to process it.
So I feel like it tracks. That is hilarious. What is something new you've learned about yourself while here?
Oh, I would say probably that I'm capable of more than I think that I am. Because here I really had to set up everything from scratch by myself without any assistance. So I think that gives me the confidence that I could do that anywhere and that it's not so scary moving anywhere.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people speak about is like, just that growth and confidence. I don't know what it's like in Australia, but, growing up in South Africa, it's very much like don't talk about your success. Don't let that be the thing you lead with. And then you get here and, in order for you to even, be part of a conversation, you have to learn how to assert yourself in a way. Is that something that you've experienced as well, or?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think especially moving to somewhere like New York, you definitely have to be assertive and confident to figure things out and get things done. Especially when you're navigating a new system as well. But maybe assertiveness is probably the best way to describe it, because here I feel like people are not I guess, and this is generalized assumption, but no one's going to guess how you're feeling or what you want. If you don't say it, no one's going to know. And especially in New York where people keep to themselves, I feel people are very good at just ignoring anything around them. So you could be having a breakdown, but if you don't say, hey, I want some help, no one's going to reach out, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's
true. That's very true. I always tell people, like when I'm with someone and they're like, we're on the subway and they're just like staring, I'm just like, do not stare at anyone. Just face the front, look at your phone, don't stare at anyone. In the sense of like, just act so aloof, because in New York, that's really that's really the energy. It's like it's busy and everyone's minding their own business. So you're right. If you want to get someone's attention, you better say something.
Yeah.
What is something that you're holding on to about yourself from back home?
Oh, yeah, I really don't. What am I holding on to? Yeah, I guess maybe it's traditions and trying to stay connected to the news and things like that. And trying to, I guess, cook and bake things that are traditional that I'm used to. And I probably bake them more here than I do elsewhere. But yeah, otherwise, probably just trying to stay grounded and easygoing as much as I can. I think that's a very Australian thing, is to be easygoing and relax and be able to roll with the punches. So I guess I definitely try and maintain that personality, but I guess it can be hard in the city. So
that's true. Okay, 2 more questions. What form of non-financial support do you wish you had before you arrived, as you just arrived?
I guess it would just be the knowledge of how to navigate the system here. So everything from having known where to go to set up a bank account, as in, I know you have to go to a bank, but what bank? There are so many here. That knowledge of how to get your social security card, how to, like, who to set up a phone with, where do people get their basic necessities from groceries to homewares from. I'd say that would have been like the most helpful thing when you start, is just that knowledge of how to navigate this city that you're in, instead of having to go through all the channels to find that information yourself. I think if someone had given me, or like told me, hey, do this first and then this and then do the third thing, I think that would have been super helpful.
That's true. That's very true. And shout out to the sirens, because how you in New York and not hear sirens?
Yeah.
If someone is, sitting in Australia, in Melbourne, or in Newcastle, what is something a piece of advice that you would give them as they're considering, making a move here? An adult, someone in their adulthood is over 30 or over 25, just, wants to make that move. What's a piece of advice that you'd have for them?
I would say, first of all, do it, because it's always a fun experience. But I would say that making a community as fast as you can will help you enjoy where you move as much as you can, because as much as it's the experience that you have fun and you'll remember, I think the people that you meet will make that experience 100% better. So I think finding a community and thinking ahead of what communities you might want to join would probably be the best advice I could give to someone moving over.
That's a good one. And then last question, has here become home?
Oh, I think so. Almost. I think I feel very comfortable in New York now. And as much as I feel sad when I leave home every time, I think it's becoming easier to come back. And I think each time I feel a little less homesick when I first come back. So yeah, I think it's slowly becoming home.
Marie, thank you so much for sharing your story about your journey. And as your journey is continuing, as well as you're, still in New York, still figuring out what your next steps are going to be, as you also are taking many steps and many strides with your running, and how that's been so pivotal in helping you build out your community. and the things about your own about your own culture that you're exposing and sharing with your community through your amazing culinary skills. So that's something that I've personally been a beneficiary of, and I'm really glad that today our listeners also got to hear and get a taste of the woman that you are and the wonderful things that you do.
Yeah, thank you.
And if people want to get in touch with you to learn more about your work, or want to join a running club when they come to New York, where can they find you?
Oh, so I am
Just
on
your LinkedIn is fine, or Instagram, whatever you prefer.
LinkedIn. Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is very, very work based. But I believe it's just my full name.
Okay, we'll have your name in the, and we'll try and link it to your LinkedIn and your Instagram, because I know there are probably some girls in science, some women in science that may be interested and want to reach out to you to learn more about your work and just really your academic journey thus far. So thank you so much for sharing this with us, guys. Make sure that you listen to this. Obviously, if you've gone to this part, you've listened to this episode. Make sure you share this episode so that many of your other friends can listen to it too. It's the first week of 2024. So excited to have started off the year on a really, really good note with you, wishing you nothing but success for the rest of the year that lies ahead. So thank you for being a guest today. I really, really, really appreciate it. Thanks, guys. As we always say here, have the day that you deserve. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the show and you want to stay connected, make sure that you are subscribed and following us on your favorite podcasting platform, which does include YouTube. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me to keep bringing you this type of content. Also, don't forget to rate the podcast, give us a good rating, and to leave a review, leave a comment, because your feedback also helps to shape the show and it lets me know what type of stuff you guys want to keep hearing and seeing. Lastly, if you have any questions, feedback, suggestions, DM me on our Instagram account, which is Home to Hear. We can't wait to hear from you. Bye, guys.